with the next item on the agenda, that is the NRCS water supply and drought report. This is Jordan Clayton. We'd like to welcome him to the mic and look forward to your presentation. We have had a little bit of moisture, but let us know where we're at.
Push this. How about that?
There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much for the time to present this afternoon, I should say. Appreciate the time and good afternoon. Again, my name is Jordan Clayton. I'm with the NRCS, and I'm going to provide an update about our snowpack and water supply. And similar to the meeting in St. George, I unfortunately don't have a lot of great news, but I'll try to provide as much information as we have right now. I'll start with the current conditions at our SNOTEL sites, our snowpack measurement sites across the state. And you can see those are shown on this map by the small circles throughout the state. They're colored by what percent of normal they are right now. This was taken this morning. And they also, you can see visible are the major basins across the state and what percent normal those basins are as well. With the exception of the Bear Basin in the northern portion of the state, you can see the majority of the state is below normal for this time of year from a snowpack perspective. I would caution that as we get into lower and lower portions of our snowpack, as we get towards lower and lower normals for this time of year, these percent of normal numbers become a little bit more meaningless. So when we're comparing against a normal that's close to 1 inch or 2 inches or something, the percentages tend to blow up in either direction. So they're not quite as meaningful as they were a few weeks ago, but I still do think they're instructive. So I wanted to include them for today's presentation. Also shown here is the trend over time for how our snowpack is done this winter. The current water year is shown with that black line. The way to compare this, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, is to look at the green line, which would be a normal snowpack. And you can see the current snowpack is well below that line. It's trended well below that line really since about the second week of January. Or late January, and unfortunately, that excellent precipitation that we did receive in December and October, which did boost our precipitation totals, did not lead to the snowpack totals that we were hoping for this year because the precipitation really turned off during the months of January and February. And we've done okay during March and April, a little bit below normal, depending on which basin you look at. Some areas, particularly northern Utah, have done a little bit better. The Bear and the Weber are above normal for the month of April. But from a statewide perspective, we're still unfortunately below normal for our SWE. I also plotted on this graph last year. You can see that with the purple line, and it's pretty disappointing to be when we got to our peak, and since then to be hovering very close to last year's snowpack totals. Okay, I was mentioning precipitation. These are the major basins again. Also shown again are the SNOTEL sites. The same coloring scheme, a lot more green on this map. We're close to normal for precipitation across the state with the exception of the southern Wasatch Front and portions of the southern spine of mountains and the westward facing portions of those. But really predominant pattern here is close to normal for the annual water year. Again, most of that comes because of the huge boost that we had during October and December. We've done pretty well, as I mentioned, in northern Utah over the last month and a half. And that's how the Bear got back up to 100%. But by and large, we're trending a little bit below normal, as you can see from the graph in the bottom left, showing the current water year. Soil moisture continues to be positive. This is the same type of graph now showing the current water year for soil moisture across the state. This is a depth averaged value, so it looks at our 2-inch sensor, our 8-inch sensor, and our 20-inch sensor down. Just looking at the mountain locations does not include our scan sites, so this is just our SNOTEL sites. And we're still right about normal, just a little bit above normal, depending on which basin you look at. Some have trended a little bit below by now, but that's okay. We're feeling pretty good about the soil moisture levels in the mountains, and that's going to promote a better efficiency of our runoff than we experienced last spring. Last spring, we lost a really large percentage of our snow water to headwater locations and replenishing that sponge, if you will. And we're expecting a better return on our snowpack investment this year. We're already starting to see that. These are graphs borrowed from the U.S. Geological Survey that I wanted to show for current context. I wanted to focus first on the two maps on the right. This shows the monthly total stream flow for the basins in Utah for last year on the top right and this year on the bottom right. And you can see the improvement across many portions of the state from a streamflow perspective. We've definitely felt the impacts of that better soil moisture. Even for around the same amount of snowpack, we're seeing it show up in our streams more than we did last year. So I think that's pretty instructive. From a statewide hydrograph perspective, when we lump all of our streams together, that's what we get in the bottom left there. Again, the current water year is shown with the black line. And you can see we're starting to trend into around the 20th percentile. We're still below normal, but we're not as dire as we were last year at this time. If you move your eye to the left portion of that graph, you can see last year, beginning of May, we were solidly in the bottom 10th percentile. We just issued this yesterday. This is our streamflow forecast for April through July based on the May 1 forecast. So it does include all the flow that we've already received for the month of April. And it forecasts forward the total volume that we'll receive from that beginning of April till the end of July period as a volume. And of course, it's colored by the same coloring scheme where red is below 50% of normal. Most of the state in the southwestern portion is looking at forecasts that are below 50% of normal runoff. Most of the rest of the state is between 50 and 90% of normal runoff that's anticipated at this point. I would mention our partners at the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center have a similar forecasting regime, of course, and their predictions are pretty close to these. I don't want to speak for that agency per se, but I do want to mention that we do reach out to the CBRFC when we are working on these forecasts, and it sounds like there's pretty good alignment between that agency and ours for this month. Statewide reservoir levels are shown here. I marked 2022 with the red line. I just plotted this before coming over. We've got 58% of capacity right now in our reservoir system. That's down 10% from this time last year. The closest previous year that we can compare to is that 2016 line, which is the green line. And we're starting to trend a little bit below that line at this point. But by comparison, that is the closest one that we can think of from a management perspective. 2021 is shown by the blue line. You can see we're well below where we were last year from a reservoir perspective. And this is also fresh, hot off the press, if you will. These are the surface water supply indexes for the major basins in Utah. We've hoped that these are instructive. We intend for these to be a really useful measure of how much water is going to be available for those summer months. So this combines the volume of water that we're anticipating for those major basins with what's there right now in those reservoir systems. And then we compare it to the previous 30, 40 years for those basins to get an index. Where the index is in the bottom 20th percentile, it shows as red. And so you can see there's a really large number of the basins in the state that are in the red category. There are several in the state that are very, very low. The Provo and the upper severe are both at 2%, the second percentile. Also, Joe's Valley, several others in the state that are very, very low at this point. Upper severe and lower severe, I should mention. How does that compare to last year? The current surface water supply index percentiles are shown on the left side of this chart. For May 1st, the last year, May 1st, SWASI's, as you will, the surface water supply indexes are shown on the right side, and then you can see the relative change is the final column there. Areas of the state that were improving, we've seen some improvement, are the Uintas, the Virgin, Moab area, and the Little Bear have all significantly improved from last year, and that's positive. I like to try to highlight anything positive that I can say at this point. Unfortunately, the Bear and the Provo and the lower severe are significantly degraded from last year from a surface water supply index perspective. We just published our May 1st water supply outlook report yesterday. I'm happy to add people to that distribution list if anyone is concerned about getting those. And of course, we will continue to supply our climate and water reports through the course of the summer, which do include reservoir data and soil moisture information. But this was the last water supply outlook report of the water year. We'll continue to report on those next January. Those are all the comments that I have, and of course, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jordan. Are there any questions from the board relative to report that Jordan just gave us?
Mr. Chairman, a question for Jordan on the Bear River, where it's dropped as much on the surface water supply index. Is that primarily a reflection of the lower level of Bear Lake?
Correct. Yeah, that's largely driven by a change in storage and not as much in the forecast themselves, because the forecasts are quite similar to last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Appreciate that.